The observation deck of Nexus Prime offered the most breathtaking view in the known galaxy. A sprawling canvas of stars punctuated by the comings and goings of vessels from 100 worlds. Dominic Vaughn stood motionless at the diamond glass barrier, his reflection superimposed over the cosmic tapestry beyond. His diplomatic uniform, bearing Earth's emblem of a phoenix rising from blue flames, felt increasingly like a costume rather than the symbol of authority it was meant to be. Ambassador Vaughn, a melodic, artificially pleasant voice called from behind him. The council will reconvene in 17 minutes. Dominic didn't turn to face the Nexian attendant. Thank you. Once alone again, he allowed his carefully maintained diplomatic mask to slip. 3 weeks of negotiations, and Earth was no closer to security than when he'd arrived. The Galactic Council, a collection of the most powerful species in the known universe, had made their position clear through 1,000 diplomatic niceties. Earth would pay for the Proxima incident or face the consequences. The fact that the incident had been an accident, a miscalibration in Earth's new quantum communication array that had inadvertently disrupted several nearby systems, seemed irrelevant to the Council. They wanted retribution, and Earth, still recovering from the climate wars that had nearly ended human civilization a century earlier, had little to offer except submission. Dominic's communication device pulsed against his wrist. Admiral Frost's weathered face appeared in holographic form above his arm. Tell me something good, Vaughn. Dominic's jaw tightened. I can't, sir. The Council has rejected our final proposal. They're demanding technology transfers, resource rights, and military occupation of the outer colonies. That's tantamount to surrender, Frost said, his voice tightening. It is surrender, Dominic replied. They're using the Proxima incident as an excuse. Earth recovered too quickly from the climate wars. We've become a threat to the established order. Frost's holographic visage seemed to age before Dominic's eyes. What options do we have? None through conventional diplomacy, Dominic replied. I've exhausted every channel. He paused, his mind racing toward the one possibility he'd been reluctant to mention. There is one thing, an ancient provision in galactic law. Trial by combat. The Admiral's eyebrows raised. Explain. Any species facing punitive action can invoke the right to settle the matter through single combat. One warrior representing Earth against one representing the Council. Winner takes all. That sounds like a desperate measure from a less civilized age. It is, Dominic agreed. But it's still in the legal codex, and they'd be bound to honor it. The Council likes to maintain the appearance of law, even while they twist it to their needs. Frost was silent for several moments. Do we have anyone who could win such a contest? Who would they choose as champion? Dominic's expression darkened. Almost certainly Selira, the Kyrian Gladiator. She's been undefeated for over 3 centuries. 372 confirmed victories in the Nexus arena. Then it's suicide. Maybe, Dominic conceded. But the alternative is definitely extinction. When Frost spoke again, his voice had acquired the hard edge that had made him famous during Earth's darkest hours. Make the challenge, Ambassador. Better to go down, fighting than surrender, everything our ancestors rebuilt. The connection terminated, leaving Dominic alone with the weight of billions of lives balanced on a desperate gambit. His eyes drifted back to the stars beyond the glass, some of which housed human colonies that would soon face occupation, or worse, if he failed. Before his diplomatic posting, Dominic had served in Earth's Special Tactical Division, a unit tasked with handling the most dangerous off-world situations. He had killed, he had saved, and he had learned that politics rarely aligned with justice. It was why he'd eventually accepted the diplomatic corps' offer, a naive belief that he could make more difference with words than weapons. Now, walking back toward the council chambers, he wondered if he'd been wrong all along. The council chamber of Nexus Prime was designed to humble. A vast dome stretching nearly 100 meters overhead displayed a real-time map of the governed galaxy, with pulsing lights representing active trade routes, military installations, and major population centers. Earth's position was marked by a tiny blue dot, barely visible among the vast network of more established worlds. 12 raised platforms arranged in a circle contained the representatives of the founding species. Humans, as relatively recent arrivals to interstellar civilization, occupied one of the 30 smaller podiums arranged in concentric rings outside the inner circle. High Counselor Vex of the Taurian regime stood as Dominic entered. With his massive frame, ridged cranium, and eyes that shifted color with his mood, currently a cold amber, he physically embodied the Council's authority. Ambassador Vaughn. Vex's voice reverberated through the chamber, enhanced by subtle acoustics. The Council has reviewed Earth's final proposal and found it insufficient. We are prepared to deliver our judgment regarding the Proxima incident. Dominic moved to the center of the chamber, aware of hundreds of eyes from dozens of species tracking his movement. Some with sympathy, most with indifference, a few with poorly concealed satisfaction. Before the Council renders judgment, Dominic said, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. Earth wishes to invoke Article 7, Section 12 of the Foundational Accords. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Vex's eyes shifted to a startled blue. Trial by combat, Dominic continued, his voice ringing clear in the sudden silence. As is our right under galactic law, when facing punitive actions that threaten our sovereignty. Vex recovered quickly, his eyes settling into a calculating green. The trial by combat provision is archaic, Ambassador. It has not been invoked for over 8 standard cycles. Yet it remains valid law, Dominic countered, unless the Council wishes to acknowledge that its legal code is selectively enforced. The barb struck home. Several Council members shifted uncomfortably as murmurs spread through the observation galleries. Very well, Vex said after a moment of whispered consultation with his aides. Earth invokes trial by combat. The Council will select its champion. His lipless mouth curved into what passed for a Taurian smile. I assume your military has dispatched a suitable warrior to represent humanity? This was the moment Dominic had been dreading and planning for. I will serve as Earth's champion. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices. Even Vex seemed genuinely startled. You, the High Counselor, finally managed. A diplomat? I was Special Tactical Division before my diplomatic posting, Dominic replied calmly. I am qualified under the combat provisions. Against most opponents, perhaps, Vex said, regaining his composure. But the Council selects Salira of the Kyrian as our champion. The name sent another wave of reaction through the chamber. On a display screen overhead, an image appeared of a female humanoid figure with pale silver-blue skin, fierce amber eyes, and a mane of what appeared to be tendrils rather than hair flowing down her back. The display listed her arena record, 372 victories, 0 defeats. I accept the challenge, Dominic said before his courage could falter. Vex's eyes shifted to a satisfied purple. The combat will take place in 3 standard cycles. Sufficient time for you to prepare, Ambassador. The way he emphasized the last word made it clear he considered the matter already decided. As Dominic left the chamber, whispers followed him. He had either just saved Earth or doomed himself to a spectacular and pointless death. Perhaps both. The combat preparation chamber assigned to Dominic was Spartan but functional. A sleeping alcove, training area, and meditation space were all contained within the circular room. What it lacked was any form of communication with the outside, standard procedure to prevent coaching or interference during the preparation period. He had just finished a set of calibration exercises when the chamber door hissed open to admit a visitor. Unexpected since he'd been told he would be in isolation. The figure that entered moved with a grace that seemed almost liquid, balancing on digitigrade legs that resembled a earth felines. Green-gold skin caught the light as she approached, revealing intricate patterns that might have been natural or tattooed. Krya of Centauri, she introduced herself. Former arena combatant and your trainer by special dispensation of the Combat Oversight Committee. Dominic raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I was allowed a trainer. You weren't, she replied with a sharp-toothed smile. But several delegates objected to the obvious disparity in the match. The optics of the undefeated Salira crushing an untrained human diplomat didn't sit well with some of the more idealistic members. And you volunteered? I was coerced, she corrected, circling him with an evaluating gaze. I fought Salira once, centuries ago. I'm one of the few who survived to reflect on the experience. She gestured to a long scar that ran from her shoulder down to her wrist. You have military training? 15 years special tactical. Combat experience? 7 major engagements, 24 smaller operations. She nodded, seemingly unimpressed. Against other humans. What about xenotype combat? 3 operations involving non-human hostile forces. Basic training encountering the major council species. The Kyrian aren't a major council species, Kryas said, her tone sharpening. They're a warrior culture evolved on a high-gravity death world, with metabolic systems that function at triple the efficiency of yours. Reflex response times that would make your fastest predators seem sluggish, and a cultural history that revolves entirely around combat perfection. Dominic maintained eye contact. I'm aware of the odds. Are you? Krya moved suddenly, a green blur that Dominic barely tracked before he found himself pinned against the wall, her forearm across his throat. That was approximately 1/3 of Salira's speed. She would have removed your head before you registered movement. She released him and stepped back. We have 3 cycles to make you something more than a momentary diversion. I hope you're a quick learner, human. For the next several hours, Kryas subjected Dominic to a battery of tests. Reflexes, strength, endurance, tactical thinking, weapons proficiency. By the time she called a halt, sweat had soaked through his training attire, and his muscles burned with fatigue. You're not entirely hopeless, she conceded, which from her seemed high praise. Your tactical instincts are good. You adapt quickly. But against Salira, that only means you might last minutes instead of seconds. I don't need to win, Dominic said, catching his breath. I just need to create an opportunity. Krya's eyes narrowed. What kind of opportunity? One that changes the rules of the game. Before she could press further, the chamber door opened again. A council security officer entered, his expression professionally neutral. The pre-combat ritual requires the combatants to meet in the Hall of Acknowledgement, he announced. Ambassador Vaughn will come with me. Krya looked displeased, but nodded. Remember what I said about her speed. Don't make any sudden movements unless you want the combat to start prematurely. The Hall of Acknowledgement turned out to be a circular chamber with walls of polished black stone that absorbed light rather than reflected it. A single ring of illumination from overhead cast the center of the room in stark relief while leaving the edges in shadow. Dominic was directed to stand on one side of the illuminated circle. Moments later, a door on the opposite side opened. His first thought was that the images he'd seen hadn't done Salira justice. The Kyrian warrior stood nearly 2 meters tall, her silver-blue skin catching the light in a way that made it seem to glow from within. The tendrils that served as her hair were pulled back in elaborate braids, interwoven with what appeared to be small metallic tokens. Trophies from past victories, he guessed. She wore a fitted combat suit of material he didn't recognize, dark against her pale skin except for brilliant red markings across the shoulders and down the arms. But it was her eyes that truly captured attention. Large, amber-colored, with vertical pupils that expanded slightly as she assessed him. Dominic Vaughn of Earth, she said, her voice surprisingly melodic for a being with such a fearsome reputation. You have challenged me to combat. Technically, I challenged the council, and they selected you, he corrected. The corner of her mouth twitched. Amusement or annoyance, he couldn't tell. A distinction without difference. The outcome remains the same. Perhaps, Dominic acknowledged. Or perhaps assumptions about outcomes are what lead us to overlook possibilities. Her head tilted slightly. You speak like a diplomat, even as you prepare for battle. Curious. The two aren't as different as most believe, Dominic replied. Both require understanding your opponent, maintaining discipline, and knowing when to advance or retreat. Philosophical as well, Salira observed. Most who face me attempt displays of bravado or resign themselves to defeat. You do neither. Dominic studied her, trying to see beyond the legendary Gladiator to the being beneath. May I ask a question, Salira of Kyrian? She inclined her head in assent. 372 victories over centuries of combat, he said. What compels you to continue? Something flickered in those amber eyes. So quickly, he almost missed it. Duty, honor, purpose. The words were recited like a mantra, practiced and perfect. But the flicker in her eyes suggested something else entirely. The ritual requires you to acknowledge your opponent and the stakes of combat, interrupted the council official who had remained at the edge of the light. Not to engage in conversation. Salira's gaze never left Dominic's. I acknowledge Dominic Vaughn of Earth as my opponent in sanctioned combat. I acknowledge that the outcome will determine the status of Earth in relation to council judgment regarding the Proxima incident. Dominic nodded. I acknowledge Salira of Kyrian as my opponent in sanctioned combat and accept the terms as stated. The acknowledgement is complete, the official declared. Combat will commence in the Nexus Arena at the appointed time. Until then, you will return to your preparation chambers and have no further contact. As Dominic turned to leave, Salira spoke again. Ambassador Vaughn. He paused, looking back at her. Your question, she said. It is one I have not been asked in a very long time. The admission seemed to surprise even her. Before he could respond, security officials escorted him from the chamber. But the brief exchange had confirmed something important. Beneath the legend of the undefeated warrior was a person, not just a weapon. And people, regardless of species, could be reached. From a shadowed observation gallery above the preparation chambers, Salira watched the human train. His movements were precise for his species, efficient, economical, adapting quickly to Krya's instruction. Still, against a Kyrian warrior, his efforts seemed almost poignant in their futility. Curious about your prey? A voice asked from behind her. Salira didn't turn. She'd sensed Vex approach long before he spoke. I study all opponents. The High Counselor moved to stand beside her, his massive Taurian frame dwarfing her despite her own considerable height. This one is different from your usual challengers. A diplomat turned warrior rather than the other way around. Combat reveals truth, Salira replied. Titles and backgrounds become irrelevant. Indeed, Vex agreed, though the truth it reveals about human tenacity may prove problematic. That made her turn to face him. Explain. Humanity's response to adversity has always been disproportionate, Vex said. Their destruction of Earth through climate collapse should have ended them. Instead, they rebuilt and reached the stars within a century. Their rapid advancement concerns many on the Council. So the Proxima incident is merely a convenient excuse, Salira concluded. Policy is not your concern, Salira. Vex reminded her, a hint of warning in his tone. The Council requires a decisive victory. Make an example of this human. Show the watching worlds the price of challenging established order. When she didn't immediately respond, Vex leaned closer. Remember what depends on your continued service, warrior. The implicit threat hung in the air between them, a reminder of the leash around her neck and her people's throats. Salira gave a stiff nod of acknowledgement, and Vex seemed satisfied, departing as silently as his bulky frame allowed. Alone again, Salira returned her attention to the human below. Dominic Vaughn was attempting a complex sequence of strikes against a training drone, failing more often than succeeding, yet persisting with a determination she found oddly compelling. For the briefest moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different outcome to their approaching combat, one where her centuries of unbroken victory came to an end. What would it mean for her? For her people? The thought should have disturbed her. Instead, she found herself considering it with something dangerously close to hope. Shaking off such treasonous thoughts, Salira turned away from the observation window. Such speculation was not only futile but dangerous. The combat would proceed as all others had before it. The human would fall. The Council would maintain control, and she would continue her solitary existence as the galaxy's most feared warrior, feared by all except those who truly controlled her. Back in his chamber, Dominic collapsed onto the sleeping platform, muscles screaming from Krya's brutal training regimen. He had approximately 40 hours until the combat, and his trainer seemed determined to cram years of preparation into that time. Your reflexes are improving, Krya had grudgingly admitted before leaving. But don't mistake improvement for adequacy. Salira is still beyond your capabilities. He didn't disagree with her assessment. The gap between his abilities and the Kyrian warriors was insurmountable through training alone. Victory would require something else entirely. Rolling to his side, Dominic retrieved a small metallic disc from his personal effects, no larger than a coin and seemingly unremarkable. The device had required calling in every favor he'd accumulated during his special tactical days, smuggled piece by piece through Nexus Prime's formidable security. His plan was desperate, likely suicidal, and possibly futile. But if there was even a chance it might work, might save Earth from subjugation, the risk was worth taking. A subtle vibration from the disk indicated an incoming transmission, heavily encrypted and bounced through multiple relays to avoid detection. "Foul here," came a whispered voice when Dominic activated the connection. "Security protocols are in place as requested. The broadcast will reach every communication node in Nexus Prime simultaneously when activated." "And beyond Nexus?" Dominic asked. "Propagation to major council worlds will take approximately 17 minutes due to quantum relay limitations. Non-council worlds up to 32 minutes, depending on location." "That's sufficient," Dominic decided. "Is the data package intact?" "Complete and verified," Thal confirmed. "Though I must reiterate, Ambassador, releasing this information won't just burn bridges. It will vaporize the entire diplomatic landscape." "The landscape is already a facade," Dominic replied grimly. "We're just going to show everyone what's behind the curtain." After ending the transmission, Dominic lay back, staring at the featureless ceiling. The training was necessary. He needed to survive long enough in the combat to implement his plan. But the true battle wouldn't be won with physical prowess. He closed his eyes, exhaustion finally claiming him, dreams filled with amber eyes and the weight of worlds on his shoulders. The next day's training focused on defensive techniques, ways to survive rather than win. Krya had apparently reconciled herself to Dominic's limitations and adjusted her approach accordingly. "A Kyrian warrior attacks in combinations of 3, she explained, demonstrating a blur of strikes. "It's ingrained in their combat doctrine, a cultural pattern they may not even recognize consciously. If you can anticipate the 3rd strike, you might create a momentary opening." "Might," Dominic repeated wryly. "It's more chance than anyone else has had against her," Krya retorted. "Some of the greatest warriors in the galaxy have failed to last 30 seconds against Salira. Why is she so effective?" Dominic asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Beyond the physical advantages of her species." Krya paused, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. "Kyrian warriors train from childhood, but Salira is different. There's a focus to her, an intensity that goes beyond training. Some say she fights like someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove, though what that might be, no one knows." "She's been the Council's champion for centuries," Dominic noted. "That's a long time to maintain such intensity." "Indeed," Krya agreed. "A very long time for anyone to serve as a weapon, no matter how willing." The comment lingered in Dominic's mind long after the day's training concluded. A weapon, not a warrior, not a person. Was that how the Council viewed Salira? How she viewed herself? And if so, what did that mean for his plan? As evening approached on the final day before combat, Dominic received an unexpected visitor. The chamber door opened to admit not Krya, but Salira herself. She wore civilian attire rather than combat gear, a simple tunic and leggings that somehow made her seem more approachable despite her inherently alien appearance. "This is irregular," Dominic said, rising from where he'd been reviewing combat footage. "I obtained special dispensation," she replied. "A tradition among my people allows for communion between warriors before significant battle." "Communion?" "Sharing of. I believe humans would call it perspective," she explained. "The Kyrian believe that combat is elevated when opponents understand what drives each other." Dominic gestured toward the chamber's small seating area. "I'm honored by the tradition." They sat across from each other, the air between them charged with an intensity that wasn't entirely martial. For beings from different worlds, they found themselves in remarkably similar positions, representatives of their people, carrying burdens few could understand. "Why did you become Earth Champion?" Salira asked. The truth, not the diplomatic answer. Dominic considered deflecting, but decided honesty might serve better. Because no one else could. Because Earth has just regained its footing after nearly destroying itself. And I believe humanity deserves the chance to learn from its mistakes rather than be subjugated for them. She nodded, seeming to appreciate his directness. And you believe this combat might achieve that, despite the obvious disparity between us. Combat is unpredictable, Dominic said carefully. And outcomes aren't always determined by physical superiority. Salira studied him with those remarkable amber eyes. You have a strategy beyond merely fighting. It wasn't a question, but Dominic answered anyway. Everyone has a strategy until they're actually in combat. Then it becomes about adaptation. A sound emerged from Salira that took Dominic a moment to identify as laughter, brief and surprised, as if it had escaped against her will. You quote your species' combat philosophers, she said, yet adapt it to avoid directly answering my observation. Diplomatic tactics applied to warrior discourse. Dominic smiled. As I said before, they're not so different. A comfortable silence fell between them, surprisingly free of the tension one might expect between opponents facing mortal combat. Finally, Salira spoke again, her voice softer. 372 victories, she said, echoing his earlier question. You asked what compels me to continue. Dominic remained silent, giving her space to elaborate. The Kyrian are not a council race, she began. We are a protected species. After the Ascension Wars, when my ancestors fought against council expansion, our defeat was total. Rather than extermination, the council offered terms. The Kyrian would be preserved, allowed limited autonomy, in exchange for selected warriors serving council interests. You're a hostage, Dominic realized. Her expression remained neutral, but her tendrils rippled in what he guessed was agitation. I'm the guarantor of my people's continued existence. For each victory in the arena, the Kyrian are granted another cycle of peace. My defeats would become their suffering. The implications struck Dominic like a physical blow. For centuries, Salira had carried the weight of her entire species on her shoulders, fighting not for glory, but for their basic survival. The council uses you, he said, anger edging into his voice. As they use many, she replied with surprising calmness. Your Earth is merely the latest to experience their methods. They maintain the appearance of galactic harmony while enforcing their will through carefully applied pressure. Why tell me this? Dominic asked. Eve of combat seems a strange time for revelations. Salira's gaze seemed to pierce through him. Because in our brief exchanges, you have seen me as more than a weapon. It has been a very long time since anyone looked at me and saw a person. The vulnerability in her admission stirred something in Dominic. Compassion, certainly, but something deeper as well. Recognition, perhaps. Two beings caught in machinery much larger than themselves, trying to protect their people while maintaining their own humanity or whatever the Kyrian equivalent might be. Tomorrow, in the arena, Salira continued, I will fight with all my ability. My people's safety demands nothing less. I understand, Dominic said, and I will do the same for mine. She rose to leave, but paused at the door. In another reality, Ambassador Vaughn, I believe we might have been allies rather than opponents. Perhaps, Dominic replied, we still could be. The look she gave him was unreadable, but her final words lingered long after she departed. Some chains are broken only when we accept we cannot break them alone. That night, sleep eluded Dominic. His mind raced through combat strategies, political implications, and the unexpected connection he'd formed with the very warrior he was meant to face. Salira's revelation had changed everything and nothing. His plan remained the same, but its implications now stretched beyond Earth's fate to encompass the Kyrian as well. In the pre-dawn hours, he finalized his preparations. The data package was ready. The transmission device, secured in a compartment beneath the skin of his forearm, undetectable by standard security scans. A simple neural command would activate it when the moment was right. Morning arrived with the artificial dawn of Nexus Prime's environmental systems. Krya appeared one final time, her expression grim. "The arena awaits," she said simply. "Are you ready?" Dominic nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over him. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Then I have one last piece of advice," Krya said. "In all my years observing Solyra, I've noticed something few others have, a fractional hesitation before executing a killing blow. Almost imperceptible, but real. As if some part of her resists the finality of death despite her perfect record. Why tell me this now? Because it may be the only thing that gives you the seconds you need for whatever you're planning." Her eyes narrowed knowingly. "I'm not a fool, Dominic. No human would enter this combat expecting to win through conventional means." He neither confirmed nor denied her assumption. "Thank you, Krya, for everything. Just make it count," she replied. "The galaxy is watching." Those words echoed in Dominic's mind as he was escorted to the preparation chamber beneath the Nexus arena. The ancient amphitheater had been constructed in the earliest days of the Council, a remnant of times when disputes were commonly settled through combat rather than diplomacy. Now it served primarily as entertainment, the spectacle of gladiatorial contests drawing crowds from across Council space. Today, however, it would return to its original purpose, a battlefield where the fate of worlds would be decided. As Dominic was outfitted in the traditional combat attire, lightweight armor designed to protect vital areas while allowing freedom of movement, he heard the rumble of the gathering crowd above. Tens of thousands in person, billions more watching via broadcast throughout Council space. The perfect audience for what he had planned. A final inspection of his equipment, a last systems check of his neural implants, and then the signal came. It was time. The lift platform rose, carrying him upward into the arena proper. Blinding light momentarily disoriented him before his eyes adjusted to reveal the vast circular battlefield surrounded by tiered seating that stretched upward for hundreds of meters. The crowd's roar washed over him like a physical wave. Across the arena, another platform rose, carrying Solyra. Even at a distance, her presence commanded attention. She wore her traditional combat armor, the red markings seeming to glow against her silver-blue skin. Unlike Dominic's artificial calm, her serenity appeared genuine, the tranquility of absolute confidence. High Counselor Vex's voice boomed across the arena, enhanced by acoustic technology. "Today we witness trial by combat, invoked under Article 7, Section 12 of the Foundational Accords. Earth stands accused of violations resulting from the Proxima incident. The outcome of this combat will determine judgment." The formalities continued, but Dominic barely registered them. His focus narrowed to Solyra and the moments that would soon unfold between them. Their eyes met across the expanse, and in that instant, something passed between them. An acknowledgement of the truth behind the spectacle, the lives hanging in the balance, and the roles they had been cast to play. "Warriors," Vex concluded, "prepare for combat." A transparent barrier rose around the outer perimeter of the arena, protecting spectators from what was to come. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation. A single tone rang out, pure and clear. Combat had begun. Solyra moved with the liquid grace Krya had warned of, covering half the distance between them before Dominic's muscles had even begun to respond. He barely managed to dodge her initial strike, a sweeping move that would have incapacitated him instantly had it connected. Training took over. Dominic didn't try to match her speed or power, an impossible task, but instead focused on prediction and evasion, falling into the defensive patterns Krya had drilled into him. The first exchange lasted less than 10 seconds, yet felt like minutes as his enhanced perception struggled to process Solyra's movements. They separated, circling, reassessing. "Impressive reflexes," Solyra acknowledged, her breathing unchanged while Dominic's came in controlled but heavy bursts. "You've prepared well." "Had an excellent teacher," Dominic replied, using the brief respite to activate the first phase of his neural enhancements. Temporary modifications that would push his system beyond normal human limitations at the cost of significant physical strain. The next clash came without warning. Salira seemed to blur as she attacked with a combination of strikes aimed at progressively lower targets: shoulders, torso, knees. Dominic blocked the first, partially deflected the second, but the third caught him across the thigh with enough force to send him rolling across the arena floor. Pain blossomed, but the neural modifications dampened it to a manageable level. He regained his footing as Salira pressed her advantage, forcing him into a continuous defensive retreat. In the council observation box, Vex watched with growing satisfaction. The human was showing surprising resilience, but the outcome was inevitable. Already the combat had lasted longer than many had wagered, which would make the eventual victory all the more impressive. "Your champion fights well," remarked the Arcturian delegate beside him. "Perhaps too well." Vex flicked a dismissive hand. Salira knows her duty. She is merely providing the spectacle the crowd expects. Down in the arena, Dominic felt his enhanced systems beginning to strain. The modifications were designed for short bursts, not sustained combat. He needed to implement the next phase of his plan before exhaustion claimed him. As Salira came at him again, he intentionally left an opening, a calculated risk that resulted in a punishing blow to his ribcage, but gave him the positioning he needed. Their bodies came close, almost an embrace, before she threw him across the arena. In that moment of contact, Dominic had activated the transmission device. Throughout Nexus Prime, communication systems suddenly carried a new signal, breaking through security protocols, overriding scheduled broadcasts, spreading outward to council worlds beyond. On view screens around the arena, the combat footage was replaced by a series of documents, images, and recorded conversations. The crowd's roar faltered as confusion spread. Even Salira paused her advance, attention caught by the unexpected development. "What is this?" Vex's voice thundered, rage replacing his earlier satisfaction. "Security override. Cut the transmission." But the system had been designed to resist exactly such interventions. The data continued to flow, exposing centuries of council manipulation, evidence of the Kyrians' effective imprisonment, the true purpose of the gladiatorial combats as political tools rather than judicial proceedings, the systematic suppression of emerging species who showed too much promise, including the manufacture crisis around Earth's Proxima incident. Most damning of all were recorded conversations between Vex and other high-ranking council members, planning Earth's subjugation long before any incident had occurred. The crowd's confusion turned to anger as the revelations continued. In the council box, chaos erupted as delegates turned on each other, demanding explanations or making hasty denials. In the arena, Dominic rose to his feet, facing Salira across the suddenly quiet battlefield. "Now you understand," he called, his voice carrying in the hush. "This was never about justice, never about honor. The combat is a performance, a tool to maintain control through fear and tradition." Salira stood motionless, her expression unreadable as the evidence of her people's captivity played across the arena screens. Centuries of service, hundreds of combats, fought not for glory but under implicit threat. The perfect weapon, forged through perfect coercion. Salira of Kyrian. Vex's voice cut through the growing tumult. "Complete your duty. End this human now." She turned slowly, looking up at the council box where Vex stood, rage contorting his features. Then back to Dominic, who made no move to defend himself further. "I have served for 372 victories," she said, her voice amplified by the arena's acoustics. "I have killed when ordered, spared when permitted, all to preserve my people from extinction." With deliberate ceremony, she removed her primary weapon, a curved blade of material that shimmered with an inner light, and held it aloft for all to see. No more. The blade fell from her hand, clattering to the arena floor in a silence that seemed to expand beyond the physical space to encompass all of Nexus Prime. "Treasonous fool," Vex snarled. Security forces enter the arena. Execute them both. Armored figures began moving toward the arena entrances, but they were met with unexpected resistance, not just from the increasingly agitated crowd, but from their fellow security personnel. The revelations had sparked immediate division, with many refusing to follow orders they now recognized as corrupt. Dominic moved to stand beside Solara, no longer opponents, but allies against a greater enemy. "It's time for change," he said, pitching his voice to carry throughout the arena and beyond. Not just for Earth, not just for the Kyrian, but for all species who have suffered under council manipulation. "The old order falls today," Solara agreed, her presence radiating a new kind of power, not the controlled lethality of before, but something more profound. Freedom. In the ensuing chaos, Vex made a desperate move. "Initiate Protocol Omega," he commanded into his communication device. Authorization Vex Prime override. Throughout Nexus Prime, alarm systems activated. On distant Kyrian homeworld monitoring stations, automated weapons platforms began powering up, the ultimate insurance policy against rebellion. "What have you done?" Solara demanded, realizing the implications instantly. "If I cannot have order, there will be consequences," Vex replied coldly. "Your people were always living on borrowed time, Solara. Their continued existence was contingent on your service. Now they will pay the price of your betrayal." But the High Counselor had miscalculated. The transmission Dominic had initiated hadn't just exposed the Council's manipulation. It had breached their secure networks, giving Thal and his team access to systems previously thought impenetrable. Omega Protocol disrupted, came the announcement over the arena's communication system. Weapon platforms neutralized. Secure channels compromised. Vex's face contorted with impotent rage as his final gambit failed. Around him, other council members were already distancing themselves, recognizing the collapse of the old power structure. In the arena, Solara turned to Dominic. "You planned this all along." The combat was merely a stage. "The most visible stage in the galaxy," Dominic confirmed, "with the largest possible audience. You could not have known I would choose to rebel." "I didn't," he admitted. "I hoped to expose the Council's corruption regardless. Your decision was your own, and the bravest thing I've ever witnessed." Security forces loyal to the reformist faction of the Council had secured Vex and his primary supporters. The arena had become the epicenter of a revolution unfolding across Council space. Peaceful but profound, as centuries of accumulated secrets and abuses came to light. In the days that followed, the old Council structure began to dissolve. Emergency sessions established an interim governing body representing a broader coalition of species, including, for the first time, direct representation from Earth and the Kyrian homeworld. Dominic found himself elevated from ambassador to Earth's primary representative in the Reformation process. His diplomatic skills, combined with the moral authority gained through his actions in the arena, made him an essential voice in the complex negotiations that followed. Solara, freed from her role as the Council's weapon, became a symbol of change throughout the galaxy. The Kyrian people, learning of her centuries of sacrifice on their behalf, proclaimed her their rightful leader, a role she accepted with reluctance but growing determination. Amid the whirlwind of political transformation, Dominic and Solara found moments to continue the connection that had begun in those quiet moments before combat. Their shared experience had forged a bond that transcended normal diplomatic relations. "My people speak of soul resonance," Solara explained during one such moment, as they stood on a viewing platform overlooking the restructuring of what had once been the Council chambers. When two beings recognize in each other a fundamental harmony despite outward differences. "On Earth, some might call it finding kindred spirits," Dominic replied, "though that hardly seems adequate for what we've experienced." Her tendrils rippled in what he now recognized as amusement. "Your species has a gift for understatement." Their hands found each other in the space between them, 5 fingers interlacing with 7, human warmth meeting Kyrian coolness. Different in form, united in purpose. "What comes next will not be easy," Solara said, her gaze on the distant stars visible through the station's massive viewport. Dismantling centuries of entrenched power never is. No, Dominic agreed. But for the first time, it feels possible. The formal alliance between Earth and the Kyrian homeworld was announced the following day, the first of many new bonds forming in the wake of the Council's reformation. What had begun as desperate gambit to save one world had expanded into an opportunity to reshape galactic civilization itself. Vex and his closest allies faced justice for their crimes, not in gladiatorial combat, but in transparent legal proceedings broadcast throughout known space. The evidence against them, compiled over centuries and now freely available, left little room for doubt about their guilt. The Nexus Arena, symbol of the old order's manipulation, was repurposed as a forum for cultural exchange rather than combat. Species that had been kept isolated from each other by council policy now shared art, knowledge, and perspectives in what became known as the Convergence. For Dominic and Salira, personal and political became increasingly intertwined. Their growing relationship, unprecedented between their species, became itself a symbol of the new order they were helping to create, where differences were not merely tolerated but valued as sources of strength and innovation. "My people have a saying," Dominic told her as they prepared for yet another diplomatic function, "that the personal is political." "And the reverse?" Salira asked, adjusting the formal attire that had replaced her combat armor. "That's what we're discovering together," he replied, "one day at a time." The ceremony that evening would formalize the dissolution of the old Galactic Council and establish its replacement, a stellar confederation with rotating leadership and built-in safeguards against the concentration of power. Dominic and Salira would both speak, their words carried to worlds they had never visited, influencing lives they would never personally touch. Yet as they stood together before taking the stage, it was the connection between them that seemed most miraculous, the bridge between worlds that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances. 372 victories, Dominic mused, echoing the question that had started their journey together. And now, Salira's amber eyes held his. Now we count our victories differently, by worlds freed, by species unburdened, by futures reclaimed. Their hands joined once more, a gesture that had become both personal ritual and public statement. "Together," Dominic affirmed. "Together," Salira agreed, as they stepped forward to continue building the galaxy they had risked everything to create.